What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, looks like undefeated 3-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the reigning WBO World Boxing Organization welterweight world champion, who is widely considered by many to be the #1 best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and Terence Bud Crawford. Terence Crawford is 34 years of age, 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. He's 38 wins, no losses, no draws, 29 big wins by way of knockout, coming off of the biggest victory of his career after he stopped two-time welterweight world champion superstar boxer Showtime Shawn Porter via 10th round stoppage after dropping Shawn Porter twice in the 10th round and getting a stoppage victory. With that said, after the fight against Shawn Porter November 20th in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, at the Mandalay Bay, Terence Crawford announced his highly anticipated decision to part ways with long-time legendary promoter, Top Rank CEO and promoter Bob Arum, Top Rank and ESPN. Terence Crawford has now been on record to now have been is taking Top Rank and Bob Arum to court and citing that they breached their contract, they didn't fulfill their obligations, and they didn't uphold their end of the bargain as far as promoting his career and making him a bigger star. Also, Terence Crawford has the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. He makes up for 50% of that between himself and undefeated unified WBC IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer, who is widely considered by many to be top 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. has 27 wins, no losses, no draws, 21 big wins by way of knockout. He is 31 years of age, 5'9.5" with a 72-inch arm reach. With that said, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford make for the biggest fight in the sport of boxing, the most anticipated fight in the sport of boxing. But we're having a hard time getting to that fight. Now it's being reported that Errol Spence, he'll be facing WBA World Boxing Association welterweight super champion Cuban star boxer Yordenis Ugas in his next fight, possibly April 16th, possibly in Dallas, Texas. Yordenis Ugas is 27 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, 12 wins by way of knockout, 35 years of age, 5'9" with a 69-inch arm reach. So it's a unification bout. The WBA, the IBF, and the WBC titles will be on the line. Now everybody's interested to see, after Errol Spence beats Yordenis Ugas, should he be victorious, should I say, against Yordenis Ugas, the fight everybody wants to see is Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford currently doesn't have a fight, but Terence Crawford is going through a legal situation with Top Rank and Bob Arum. Is that going to prolong Terence Crawford's career? Is it going to prolong us seeing Terence Crawford back in the ring? There's reports that Terence Crawford in his next fight can face off against former unified welterweight world champion superstar boxer Keith "one-time" Thurman, who is 29 wins, 1 loss, no draws, 22 big wins by way of knockout. Keith Thurman is 33 years of age, 5'7" with a 69-inch arm reach. Keith Thurman is making his ring return after nearly a 2.5-year layoff and hiatus after losing his only loss to legendary 8-division iconic Filipino superstar world champion boxer Manny "Pac-Man" Pacquiao, who is now retired. That was July of 2019. Keith Thurman will be back in the ring February 5th against Mexican star boxer Mario Barrios. With that said, that'll take place in Mandalay Bay as well. With that said, everybody's wondering, is Keith Thurman going to fight Terence Crawford in July? Keith Thurman, he stated that Terence Crawford fight, Terence Crawford fight is going to be put on hold because Keith Thurman's fight with Mario Barrios is now going to be a title eliminator, which will make Keith Thurman a mandatory challenger for the winner, Errol Spence and Yordenis Ugas. But the WBC, they came out and they stated that that's not going to be the case. Even if it's a title eliminator, he won't be the mandatory. So that'll give Errol Spence room after the fight to face off against the winner of to face off against Terence Crawford, or dare I say the winner, Errol Spence Ugas, face off against Terence Crawford. So with that said, everybody wants to know what's next. Is Terence Crawford going to fight Keith Thurman? Well, Team Crawford, they have come out now and they stated that Terence Crawford has now switched his focus, if he can't secure the fight with Errol Spence next, to moving up to junior middleweight, 154, and focusing on becoming a mandatory challenger for the winner of the highly anticipated rematch, undisputed showdown at junior middleweight between Jermell Charlo, who is the two-time junior middleweight world champion. He's the unified junior middleweight world champion, superstar boxer. Jermell Lyons only Charlo, 34 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, 18 wins by way of knockout. He is 31 years of age, 5'11" with a 73-inch arm reach. He'll be taking on Brian Carlos Castano for a second time. Brian Castano, he holds the WBO title. Brian Castano is 17 wins, no losses, 2 draws, 12 wins by way of knockout, 32 years of age, 5'7.5" with a 67.5-inch arm reach. That's scheduled to take place March 19th, 2020, and it looks like it's going to be possibly in Las Vegas now, or possibly in LA. So I'm not sure where that fight is going to take place, but I'm being told that LA is the leading candidate. Now, they had last fought in July of 2021, and the fight ended in a split draw. Okay, so it ended in a draw, and that was the highly anticipated undisputed showdown. So now they're going into a rematch in March 19th, and now Terence Crawford is, according to his team, are going to petition the WBO, World Boxing Organization, to make himself the mandatory for the winner of this fight, so he could fight the winner of this fight and become a 4-division world champion. This all in hopes of, obviously, creating leverage for himself. Because even if Terence Crawford moves up to junior middleweight, Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence is still going to be a huge fight, because Errol Spence, he stated on record that he wants to be undisputed champion at welterweight, but he also wants to be an undisputed champion at junior middleweight, and that Errol Spence wants to move up immediately. Okay, Errol Spence is only sticking around to collect these 2 belts. He's sticking around for this Ugas fight, and Errol Spence is sticking around for the Terence Crawford fight. But does it really matter if Terence Crawford and Errol Spence fight at welterweight or they fight at junior middleweight? Okay, Errol Spence is big. Terence Crawford is not the biggest guy, but this will give Terence Crawford leverage. So Terence Crawford obviously is looking for leverage, okay? Because Errol Spence won a 60-40 split. His brand is bigger. He's done bigger pay-per-view numbers, and we already know this. And so Errol Spence says he deserves 60-40 split. Now, what would give Terence Crawford leverage? If Terence Crawford goes up, and I have Jermell Charlo favorite to beat Brian Castano, okay? Terence Crawford goes up to junior middleweight, fights and beats Jermell Charlo, and becomes undisputed at junior middleweight. Well, now it's a 50-50 fight, because Terence Crawford, Jermell Charlo is going to be a pay-per-view fight. That'll be the biggest fight in Terence Crawford's career. Terence Crawford will be undisputed in 2 separate weight classes. And now Terence Crawford beating Jermell Charlo is a bigger win than anybody Errol Spence would have beaten. And it's his accomplishments. He's already undisputed at junior welterweight. Now he'll be undisputed at junior middleweight. And he's a 4-division world champion. So that would speak volumes in the leverage for Terence Crawford as far as negotiations. Now, Errol Spence, he still has the opportunity to accomplish undisputed. Because if Terence Crawford moves up to challenge Jermell Charlo, well, that means he's going to vacate the WBO title. Which means that you could possibly see Virgil Ortiz Jr. fight Errol Spence Jr. for the vacant WBO title in a massive undisputed match. Because Virgil Ortiz Jr., who is 18 wins, no loss and no draws, 18 wins by way of knockout. He is 24 years of age, 5'10" with a 70-inch arm reach. He's the #1 ranked challenger for the WBO title. He's actually the mandatory challenger now for the WBO title. So now you will have Virgil Ortiz, who with a storyline, who's from Dallas, Texas, as well as Errol Spence. Now, Errol Spence is born in New York and raised and brought in Texas. So with that said, he represents Texas. But nonetheless, they're both from the same place, same area. And they could fight at Dallas Cowboys Stadium for undisputed will be massive. Now, does that, now that gives Errol Spence leverage as well. So now he beats Virgil Ortiz, becomes undisputed. Now he moves up. he becomes the mandatory challenger for Terence Crawford. Here's why it's interesting. Because now he can petition the WBO to become Terence Crawford's mandatory challenger, and they could somewhat do away with the negotiations as far as, you know, I want this, you want that, because now I'm the mandatory challenger. Now, I don't know if will go 60-40 in Terence Crawford's favor, just like they did with Terence Crawford with Sean Porter. They made Terence Crawford fight Sean Porter, and it was 60-40 split in favor of Terence Crawford. So maybe that be the case, okay? Now, the question is going to be begged now, is Terence Crawford going to move up to junior middleweight, and let's say he beats Jermell Charlo? Errol Spence, Terence Crawford is still huge, and now, is Terence Crawford now going to say that 60-40 in his favor? You understand? Is he going to play those cards? Because then people are going to back Terence Crawford. Then the same people that's saying it shouldn't be 60-40, it should be 50-50, and it shouldn't be about money and it shouldn't be about splits, they're suddenly going to switch and become, well, Terence Crawford accomplished this, he deserves this. That's what's going to happen. But nonetheless, it would be enormous to take place at 154, just as big as it would be at 147. So now, obviously, the biggest question is, because I picked Jermell Charlo to beat Brian Castano and stop Brian Castano. Okay, so this would be a huge fight for Jermell Charlo, Terence Crawford. That would be an enormous fight for Jermell Charlo. That would be the biggest name for Jermell Charlo, obviously. Terence Crawford is still viewed as the pound-for-pound best fight in the world. And that would be huge for Jermell Charlo. He's the two-time junior middleweight champion. He's undisputed. He would be undisputed at that point in time. And the face-off against Terence Crawford, a massive pay-per-view opportunity, would be huge in the storyline, because Jermell Charlo is also trained by a well-renowned trainer of the year in Derrick James, you know, who trains Errol Spence as well, okay? So there would be a massive storyline for Terence Crawford and Jermell Charlo. Now, Jermell Charlo is very big, he's very strong, he's very skilled, and he's very technically sound. So can Terence Crawford actually offset? Now, Terence Crawford is versatile. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but Terence Crawford can switch from southpaw to orthodox. He has power in both hands. Terence Crawford has knocked out his last 9 opponents. So it would speak volumes if Terence Crawford could offset and beat Jermell Charlo, but it would also speak volumes for Jermell Charlo if he could beat Terence Crawford. So we got to see how this unfolds. But according to Team Crawford, Terence Crawford is planning on, as a plan B, if the Errol Spence fight don't plan out, that he's going to go up to junior middleweight and focus on Jermell Charlo, Brian Castano winner. So let's see how this unfolds and plays out. But that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Raw. Make sure you like your shady videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
This is Amanda, the real deal Serrano, and you're watching Blue Blood Sports TV.